Are you here? Welcome to the Paul Leslie Hour. You know, we're celebrating 22 years of broadcasting interviews on radio and podcasts with this very episode. 22 years. This is episode number 1088, and we're getting back to our storytelling roots with this one. Over the years, we've had the privilege of welcoming great poets like Maya Angelou, Michael S. Harper, and Kodac Harrison. Well, our special guest today, Wallace Barker, is a warm human being and published poet whose captivating poetry readings and reflective insights shine in this personal interview. You're going to love Wallace. If you enjoy the show, maybe buy Paul a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thepaul-leslie. Now, let's get started.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Paul Leslie Hour. On this episode, I'm joined by author and poet Wallace Barker. He lives in the Lone Star State. In my hand here, I'm holding a copy of one of his books. This is the second one, I think.
That's correct.
Collected Poems. Thank you so much for making time and talking to me.
Paul, thank you so much for having me. I've been listening to really as many episodes as possible of your show, and I just love it. I'm so glad I found it. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate it a lot, and I also like to give credit where credit is due. This book came from a gentleman that some of us might be familiar with, Robert McCready, and you came highly recommended. He said, I think you are going to enjoy the writing of this guy, Wallace Barker.
Oh, that's really kind of him to say. I love Robert. He's just a great guy. He and I, Robert's a very talented writer himself, actually, and he and I have both been published by a literary magazine called Moo Moo House, which is actually quite prominent in certain sort of indie literary scenes. So I met Robert sort of through, I think initially kind of through that, and then he's visited Austin and we've had drinks, and just a fantastic guy, brilliant writer as well.
Well, I'll tell you also one more thing before we get rolling here. I told Robert, I said, if Wallace Barker agrees to do this interview, I'm going to shave my face. And you did, and here I am.
Well, I kind of got the impression that the mustache was a little iconic, and it's sort of like a signature mustache, but you look great.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Wallace, what has always been the purpose of the writing, the art that you do?
That's a really, really great question. I think it's something I just have always felt I needed to do. You know, the purpose, I think, it's hard to say. You know, I think, honestly, Paul, that sometimes I feel like an antenna channeling what I write from somewhere else, and I have a sort of, I have to get it down, you know, and I don't necessarily know what I'm going to write until I write it, you know, and it just feels like something that I'm compelled to do, I guess. You know, the most gratifying part of writing anything for me is just connecting with a reader. And so anytime I get any kind of feedback from somebody who's read my work, and felt, you know, connected to it, or felt like they, you know, connected to the experience that I'm writing about, that really is the pinnacle for me. And so aside from the, you know, the compulsion to write, like I mentioned, what really drives it and keeps it going is just those moments where somebody is kind enough to read it and share with me their reaction to it. And especially, you know, if they feel like it captured something they've also experienced or thought, that's really what drives me to keep going. You know, I think good writing in some ways, you know, tells you something you already knew but had never heard someone say, you know, had never read or seen in print maybe, but something that sort of resonates with you in a way where you know it's true, and you perhaps always knew it was true. And so when I get that type of reaction from a reader where they feel like that connection has occurred, that to me is it's just really powerful and gratifying. You know, poetry is a type of writing where there's no real market for it. There's no career for it outside of maybe academia, but even that's pretty difficult. So, you know, what it's all about is just finding, you know, kind of kindred spirits, like-minded people who feel the way you do, but had not seen it expressed that way.
You mentioned a few times here the reader. When you are in the process of writing, Wallace, are you thinking about the reader?
I wouldn't say I'm necessarily thinking about the reader. I think poetry is so personal, and maybe it's different from other types of writing, like fiction or nonfiction, where the kind of the thing I said before about how there's not a real market for it, or it's very rare for anybody to be commercially kind of successful with poetry, is very freeing in a way, because then if that's the case, you may as well write, what you feel, what you truly feel, authentically feel, without any regard for, what's the audience going to be for this. So I wouldn't say I think I'm thinking about the reader as I'm writing, but I certainly am thinking about the reader after I've written, and just sort of so hopeful that somebody will find it, and I don't need a large audience. One person who connects with it is a beautiful thing that really motivates me. I would say in the act of writing, the process of writing, I'm really just concerned with kind of getting across, the meaning that I'm trying to convey something that I have felt that maybe I haven't seen expressed before.
Well, Wallace Barker has been so kind. He has agreed to read some of his work, and I was hoping and thinking that maybe now here at the beginning it might be a good time to do that.
I would be honored to. I would love to do that. If there's anything in particular that you'd like to hear, I'm certainly happy to do that. I could also just sort of grab something and do it that way.
Well, what about Walk Away from Trouble, if you can?
You'll have to help me out by telling me the page number.
That was page 27 in Collected Poems.
Yeah, I got it. I'm glad you asked for this one. It's nice that you noted that one. So yeah, I'll just mention that the book is separated into 4 sections that sort of roughly correspond with the 4 major modes through which sort of I experience life, and I think lots of people in maybe a modern society experience life, and those are work, nature, home, and dreams. And so this particular comes from the work section of the book, which is good actually, because if we're going to read a few, it would be kind of fun to go through the sections. So this is from the first section, work. Walk away from trouble if you can. Things are tough all over, my dad used to say, in response to almost any complaint, always eyes toward the horizon as if speaking to himself, as if he was considering some anonymous struggle. I read today that a wealthy oil executive drove his car at high speed directly into a wall, and it exploded and he died after learning he was under indictment. He didn't think a head-on collision with a wall was as bad as legal troubles. The world continued to turn anyway. Who mourns that guy in some sense? It seems impossible to feel too bad for a guy like that. Some people have a better chance of keeping their money, not getting into legal trouble over whatever happened. The haze of history often fogs over bad decisions, always slamming into some wall at great speeds. Armies have truly perished in avoidable circumstances. It's amazing to think of the sun spasming in the sky during some long march, a black mist covering your eyes, covering your face, washing you and all your friends into the forgotten dimension.
Very nice. Very good, Wallace.
Thank you, Paul.
On the note of work, the work of writing, would you say, is it more of an escape for you, or is it more of a discipline?
Oh, I would say escape. I write a lot of my, I have a full-time occupation separate from writing, and a demanding one. And so I have written always in kind of the small hours, late at night after everything is settled and I have a moment to myself, or very early in the morning before anything begins and I have some time. I've never been able to sort of have a place or time to sit and kind of, write during the normal part of the day, I suppose. And so I've always viewed it as, I don't know if I'd say an escape, but just a kind of time, quiet time, a time of kind of contemplation and connecting with something that I feel, or that's compelling to me, that moves me, that maybe I'm not able to express in most of my life. So yeah, I would say it's not a discipline. I don't sort of crack down on myself. It's kind of the opposite. I feel I can finally breathe, in those moments.
Now, with that said, would you say there's any obstacle that you face to writing poetry?
Well, I would just say the obstacles that we all face to pursue, whatever it is that our art may be, unless you're sort of full-time occupied with your art, which God bless you if you are. But for many artists, that's not the case. Life do it, or difficulties in finding the time to do it. There's the sense of futility associated with it, especially with something like poetry, where you can't reasonably expect to make a career out of it or have it be commercially successful. At times you'll catch yourself wondering, why am I doing this? What is this for? Is this, is this vain what I'm doing? What is this? I think, two things. One, I'll say solemnity of those moments where you're doing it and you are channeling something and you're not sure what. That, and then the moment of connection with a reader that I've mentioned, those two things sort of keep you going. But yeah, I've always struggled with finding space in my life for it, and that would, I'd say, be the obstacle.
Now, we can only guess with the section called nature. Are you a person who finds refreshment, a recharge of your batteries when you get away? I see the city landscape behind you. When you get out there into the natural world.
Yeah, I love the natural world. I think I don't necessarily view it as an escape or anything. I think to me that I love in some ways the simplicity of the natural world, the way that it exists kind of without judgment or self-judgment. And I really love wild animals. I'm very into birds and really any kind, even the sort of urban animals like raccoons and possums and the things you might see, squirrels. I love all of nature like that. And I love that it exists in this world that's sort of obviously in our world, of our world, but very separate. It's like almost like a separate dimension that you can enter and exit, where the rules are different. It exists via different rules, and it's not purely benign, right? Nature can be cruel in its indifference. I mean, obviously, nature can be deadly, and there is no sort of moral code either, right? Like, the hunter and the hunted, that's just sort of a way that nature exists that is neither good nor bad, But I find that, yeah, I find entering that dimension to be really fulfilling. And, I wouldn't want to talk about it like sort of like a spa where I feel, refreshed. I don't view it that way because I don't view it as sort of purely, benign in that way. I think nature can be very cruel. But I love that the creatures that live in that dimension. I feel really attracted to them and compelled by them. And I love birds and squirrels and possums and raccoons and armadillos and skunks and just all the, everything. And of course, I love, the larger animals you might see in a national park or something like that too. I feel just captivated or like entranced by glimpses into that world that is different from our world, even though we share the same sort of physical space.
Well, Wallace, would you perhaps like to read one of the poems from nature?
I would love to. Again, if there's one in particular, let me know, or I can also just sort of grab one here.
I'll let you pick this time.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, okay. I'll read the first one from the section, Nature. I am pretending to be a mayfly. I am pretending to be a mayfly. The branches hang over the lake, cutting the sky into stained glass mosaic, and the gravel spilling over the banks, disturbed by the feet of joggers, drops into the water, thereby segmenting that clear plain as well. Everything is gray and brown. Ivy sags a rotten leaf over the fence, through which chain link I can see yoga people doing poses in the park. Each yogi is framed by her own chain link diamond, and a toppled bicycle stripped of its front wheel lolls in the bushes like a crime victim. I'm here for anyone who needs me, but no one needs me, and that's fine too. I'm like a bee in a honeycomb, waxing myself into a hexagonal cell, hoping I might emerge transformed into some new winged insect. But of course, that doesn't happen for bees.
Very good.
Thank you.
Well, Wallace, the place that you're in, Texas, the biggest state there in the continental USA, would you say that Texas has affected you as a poet?
Absolutely, yeah. I love the ecology of Texas. A lot of the animals I mentioned are sort of common animals along with deer and things like that. I love oaks and cedars. I love limestone cliffs. I'm from sort of, central Texas, which is known for its hill country. It's kind of a specific part of Texas. But I also feel a strong kinship with just the ethos of Texas, the independent streak, that really over anything else, the sense of self-reliance and independence. Texas has there's certainly a conservative aspect to the Texas character, but I think it's unique from other parts of the nation in that it's very tolerant, in the sense that there's a respect for the way different people live their lives and the importance of allowing others to live their lives. There's kind of, I think the Texas ethos is non-judgmental, because there's a very much, like, at least the way I experience it, that independence and freedom are critical. And that means, other people's independence and freedom too, to make their own decisions, even if they're different than yours. And that, yeah. So everything from the natural landscape here, which, varies quite a bit, obviously, just like you said, it's a large state. So, there's quite a bit of variation, but to the kind of philosophical sort of beliefs of Texas, the way that Texas views itself almost as like a nation unto itself, which I don't mean that in a way. Sometimes I think that gets misrepresented sort of in the media as a kind of like petulant, like sort of, we could, we're separate from the United States, or we could leave the United States or something like that. I don't view it that way. I just think it's this view that, Texas is its own country in the sort of non-political sense, and like the natural sense of the word, that it exists as a separate space. And I like that a lot. And I like that kind of no-nonsense, independent ethos.
Who would you say is your personal favorite Texan of all time?
Put me on the spot.
Yeah.
Goodness, let's see. My personal favorite Texan of all time. Coming from Austin, I've always really liked Stevie Ray Vaughan. I don't know if you're familiar with Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah.
I think he embodies a lot of what I'm talking about. He's not a stereotype of a Texan, but he's a very sort of free, independent spirit. He comes from a tradition, blues tradition, but he's also sort of uniquely himself. Really, and then just being an Austin native myself, I feel connected with him. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Stevie Ray Vaughan. I like Stevie Ray Vaughan.
I'm very impressed with that answer. I didn't expect that. His brother, Jimmy Vaughan, came on here.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, super cool guy.
I've met Jimmy Vaughan because when I was a teenager, I worked at a corner store in a neighborhood here in town, and he lived nearby, and he would come in. So when I was 16, 17 years old, Jimmy Vaughan stopped in probably once a day, just to get little things here and there. And he was quite the presence because he drove, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was some sort of restored, 60s car. And he had his big kind of Elvis style hairdo and just, just looked like a rocker. And so I wouldn't expect him to remember me because all this is a long time ago, but I have encountered Jimmy Vaughan actually many times and really, sort of day-to-day, in a very sort of casual day-to-day way.
How interesting. Well, one of the most recurring poetic themes, musical themes, if I think about home, immediately I think about Our House, written by Graham Nash. I think of Homeward Bound from Simon and Garfunkel. Tell me a little bit about the way you view your very own home. How does it feel, Wallace, to come home?
Well, I love being at home. I love my home, and maybe the older I get, the more I appreciate it. When you're young, you kind of want to get out and do things, but the older I get, the more I find that I value peace. And peace. I associate the home with peace. I feel like the demands of the world are ever present. Wherever you are, there's something expected or needed from you, and I think home is a respite from that. Not that everybody's got chores or your family, I'm sure at home could certainly, they need things from you too, but yeah, I think as cliched as it sounds, the idea of a man's home is his castle. I feel like I'm in my dominion when I'm at home, and that what I do there is for me, even if I'm doing it, for instance, for someone in my family or something, but it's still ultimately for me. I'm no longer responding to the demands of of others. And I really try to draw a bright line between work and home. I try not to take work home with me. Even during sort of like some of the pandemic shutdown stuff, I made a lot of effort to get to the office, even when I was the only one in the office. Because yeah, I think mostly the sanctity of home. I didn't want to bring work into home. I don't like bringing work into home. It feels like it's polluting the home environment almost a little bit. So yeah, so I view home as, yeah, sanctuary, respite, peace, getting away from the ever-present demands of the outside world.
Would you perhaps like to read one of the poems from the home section?
I would love to. Let me see. I would love to find one that deals with perhaps with those types of themes. Yeah, maybe let's see. Yeah, I'll read Alicia. This poem is called Alicia. Alicia. Today my love for you is like a balloon blown up. Really big, but also that isn't exactly what I want to say. I saw two squirrels playing in the lawn and thought of you. I saw a squirrel on its hind legs shelling and eating a pecan with its little hands, and I thought of you. The sky is blue and it's sunny this summer day, and I'll ride my bike to work today. I put on a blue short-sleeved collared shirt, and my whiskers are a little long, and I felt excited because I thought I looked handsome. I hoped you would think I look handsome, because I only experience myself, or at least the strongest perception of myself, is through the lens of what you might be thinking about me, and I imagine what you might be thinking about me all the time.
That just, it hits as so honest.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think is more than anything else is what I want to achieve. I'm a big believer, there's lots of different approaches to poetry. I don't think any one approach is more valid than any other. But my personal approach is, yeah, very a striving for authenticity. Doing this, I think, I don't know if you've ever heard the expression three chords and the truth about a great song. That's all you need. I think the same is true of poetry. I think, yeah, truth is beauty and beauty is truth. That's my personal poetic philosophy. And so, I once read an Allen Ginsberg quote where he said, among other things, he said that in his poetry, he strives to speak frankly to his muse. And I think about that all the time. Can I speak frankly to my muse? Can I drop the pretense and speak directly and frankly, like he said? And that's a bit of like a guiding philosophy for me. And like I said, I know that lots of poets approach it differently. There's lots of poets who focus a lot on structure and formal techniques. But yeah, for me, I'm a three chords and the truth poet.
Dropping pretense.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to me, that's what I want from poetry, is to speak directly to me. The truth is beauty is, I think, a wonderful statement, but there's like a gloss on it, which is it's sort of like non-obvious truth. It's extremely difficult. The hardest thing in art, I think, is to say something true, but that's non-obvious. And I think the best poetry does that. Like I was saying earlier, that's what I want from a reader, is to read it and feel exactly what I'm trying to convey, and have known it already, have known it their whole life, but have never seen it expressed.
Is there ever a poem that you will write and you think, this is just a little too personal? I'm not letting it out there.
Yeah, I would say I dealt with some of that. I think that being vulnerable, taking risks is really important in writing. If your writing's not making you feel a little uncomfortable, then it's probably not compelling to the reader. We all in our everyday life get enough sort of like manufactured facade of people, especially these days with, the pressures from social media or what have you to present yourself, a certain way. I think exposing yourself, making yourself vulnerable is where a lot of the power of good writing comes from, especially poetry. But your question was, have I written things where I felt sort of too exposed? And yeah, I would say yes. I would say less about me and more about where I'm writing about my relationship with someone else, and I feel like it's not clear if I would have permission to say the things I'm saying. That's when it gets really hard, and that's when I think there likely have been times where I've pulled away from doing something, feeling that it wasn't right to put it out in the world.
Well, Wallace, what inspired you to have this section in the book, Dreams?
Yeah, well, I think it's just like I said, it's a key component of our lives, and I mean dreams in a certain sense, in the most literal meaning of the word. We spend a considerable amount of our time in our lives dreaming, and it's a real sort of quadrant of our life. If there's four parts of it, let's say, if we're breaking into four parts, dreaming is a real part of that, like a very real part of it. But of course, it's also something more. It's our imagination. It's our our hopes, it's our fantasies. And I think we spend a lot of time in our lives within those, hopes and fantasies and fears. Dreams aren't always happy. But yeah, I just felt that, how I experience life, dreams is a full part of that, puzzle, I think. It's every bit as real as non-dreams.
Well, perhaps as our last poem here, there's one from Dreams that you would like to read.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull a good one from Dreams. Yeah, maybe I'll do The Good Wine.
I was just looking at that one.
Oh, good. Excellent. The Good Wine. The good wine and these certain habits people exhibit, preening almost unnoticed, and in the mirror they catch a glimpse, some other life across choppy waters, salty clams shelled from the brine, and dark beer on a gray sky day, white boats slipping into rainy harbor. The good wine, Madeline, your back arched just a bit, white crocheted top thrown over, your dark eyes moving across the water like a gull. Had we been here before, Madeline? Why did I feel as though we had always been talking at a cafe on a rainy, cold day, Madeline? You ordered the good wine, and we shared briny clams. The black beers I drank made me too full, the sky so stupid and benevolent and grinning through its clouds, and the red surface of Mars could not have been so desolate, so windswept as that casual hand through your hair, and those eyes skipping across, rough waters, madness all around. Thank you, Bob.
Yes, sir. Now, everybody has their own perspective in life. We're born, some of us think a certain way, some of us think another way, but you think like you. What is the best thing about having the perspective that you have?
Well, I don't. It's a good question. I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's a bet. I don't think my perspective is superior to any other. But I wouldn't recommend my world to anyone else. It has its positives and negatives and all that. I have my ups and downs and struggles and triumphs. But I think the best part of my perspective is I have a lot of faith in kind of a higher power and the sense that, nothing thing is as bad as it may seem. I feel like it gives me a sense of like even keel, you could say, perspective. I think I have, that's probably my favorite. Well, you asked me about my perspective, but I would say perspective on life and the world, and just sort of like how every day is, something to be grateful for. Nothing's promised. And no matter what your troubles may be, as long as you're sort of waking up on this side of the grass, that you're blessed. Yeah, I think it allows me to get through a lot of turbulent times in my life. I've experienced a lot of turbulent times, tragedies, and maybe, yeah, one of the things they've taught me is that nothing's promised. Our fates are in the hands of, greater powers. And just that, another day in this incredible world that we're all blessed to share is an amazing gift, and of course it's easier to say that than to truly sort of, we all would like, I think, to sort of feel more gratitude all the time, and life doesn't make that easy. We all deal with frustrations and setbacks and sadness and all that, but I feel like perhaps I have a more ability to sort of trust trust the plan, and that my only job is to sort of make it through another day and be grateful for the opportunity to try one more time, So yeah, that's what I would say. I think, if I may, I would think I would just say it kind of goes back to what I said about nature, or how I feel about nature, that nature is sort of neither good nor bad. It's kind of indifferent in a way, but that's what's really beautiful and wonderful about it. It's also non-judgmental, it doesn't, it exists and it does what it does. And, you can participate in that or not, or whatever. And I guess, yeah, that also sort of applies to life, I guess, that it's amazing that we're here at all. And, where you go from there is sort of up to you.
I love that. It's amazing that we're here at all. That's so good. Well, everybody out there, if you'd like to find out more about Wallace Barker, it's spelled like that, wallacebarker.com. Check him out. You know, I'm always blown away by the fact that we just never know who and where somebody is listening from. Sometimes it just stuns me. You know, somebody who is on the other side of the world is listening. What would you say to anybody who's tuned in with us in closing?
Yeah, I would say, you can find my books and also just poems that have been published online at wallacebarker.com. And I'm not saying that in a purely promotional way. You'll also find my email address on the site. And like I said, sort of earlier in the discussion, the most incredible thing for me, the most gratifying thing for me is connecting with somebody who's read my work and felt something about it, felt some sort of connection to it. And so, yeah, I would love, no matter where you are in the world, if you do take the time to read some of my work, I would love to hear from you. It's what fuels me. It's what keeps me going. The reader, I think, art is a two-way process. There's the creation of the art. There's also the experience of the art by the reader or audience. And art doesn't exist until those two things come together. If you don't have a readership or an audience, then it's sort of diaristic. And when somebody else experiences the art you create, that's when sort of the magic happens. That's when the explosion occurs, when the catalyst happens. And so my work writing these poems is only half of the creation of art. The other part is the reader. And when I receive any kind of, communication about my work, it's just wonderful to know that, it's been a moment of creation that I can't do alone, that I require readers for. So I would just really tell anyone who's listening, if you do take the time to visit the site, wallacebarker.com, and you read something, please reach out and let me know, because it's what it's all about. It's the reason I do all this.
I get a good boost from you, Wallace.
Well, thank you, Pi. I feel really good energy from you too, and that's one of the reasons I love listening to your show, is because I just feel like I'm listening to a good friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Well, Wallace, I will hope to be shaking your hand in person one of these days.
That would be wonderful. If you have plans to visit Austin, you have to let me know. And I understand you're based in South Carolina?
That's right.
Yeah. So, of course, maybe I'll arrange something. If I ever find myself in your area, I'll arrange something through our mutual friend, Robert. And I would love to have a drink.
Absolutely. All right, sir. Until next time.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.